What's up, everyone? This is Elliott Connie. For over 15 years, I've helped thousands of counselors support their clients and worked with tens of thousands of clients on my own to help them find solutions in their everyday lives. And I want to welcome you back to the aha moments where every day I share the lessons I learned in my work and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. And today I want to talk about a really special topic. I want to talk about what inspires you during really difficult times. You know, when I was young, I had some challenges that I needed to face as a young man. My relationship with my father was really difficult. He had an anger problem and it caused him to not treat his children and partner too well. I'll say it that way. And as a result, I struggled with anxiety, low self-esteem, depression. There were times in my teenage years where I struggled with suicidal thoughts. I had a real struggle with life was just really, really hard. What I really wanted was for someone to believe in me. You know, I'm the type of person that I'm constantly inspired by two things. Number one, when I see people able to overcome really hard things, it helps me feel like if they could do it, I could do it. And I'm also really touched and inspired by people who believe in me. And I think back to my childhood and potentially the first person that believed in me, and I mean like truly believed in me as a person, as a man, someone who believed that I was capable of doing good things in this world, was my very best friend's father. I grew up calling him Mr. Crandall. And Mr. Crandall was probably, number one, he's probably the best man I've ever known to this day. I mean, he's the type of guy that when you watch the way that he treats his wife, the mother of my best friend, I remember thinking, like, I want to be like that. You know, my home was a home where there wasn't a lot of structure, there wasn't a lot of safety and security. And when I would go to my best friend's house, there was a lot of love and kindness and joy and routine. And I'll never forget Mr. Crandall and Mrs. Crandall opening their home to me. Like, looking back, I think they knew that I was struggling in the way that I was struggling, and they never really talked to me about it. But I remember I got to a point in my childhood where my mom had decided we needed to move to Texas. I was 16 at the time, late in high school, maybe even 17 actually, because I think I was early in college. I went to college at 17. And I was kind of struggling with the decision on whether I was going to go to Texas or not. And I'll never forget Mr. and Mrs. Crandall pulling me aside and saying, you know, you can stay here if you want to. And I didn't know what to do. And I asked them, like, you know, I don't have any money to pay rent. And I wanted to, and they said, well, if you stay here, you could just buy the family orange juice and that would be your rent. You know, throughout my childhood, they were very clear to let me know that anytime I needed to come over, I can come over. And they showed me how to get into the back door of their home, even if they weren't home. Mr. Crandall would give me rides to our sporting events. I often played on the same team as their son, Kyle, my best friend, and took me on family vacations with them. And I remember just feeling like that's the kind of person I want to be. And it really impacted me because it let me know that I could choose how I wanted to be. I remember, like, studying in school, people would say, if you come from an environment where there's anger and frustration and all those things, you're very likely to experience those things in your adulthood. But because I never saw Mr. Crandall react like that, I never saw Mr. Crandall behave like that, it kind of gave me permission to choose the type of man I wanted to be. And I'm now the type of man that I don't prey upon women. I do not abuse women. I've never touched a woman in anger. I've never done any of those things. And I think Mr. Crandall was one of the first people to inspire me in that way because I could look at him as an example on, like, that's the type of man I want to be. I want people around me to feel safe, comfortable, happy, and joy. And he was the first example of someone that I thought was very, very strong, but also simultaneously very, very kind, very, very, very soft-spoken. It was a true inspiration in my life. And if I hadn't met Kyle and his wonderful family, his mom and his dad, I'm not sure that I would have gotten through my childhood in the way that I have and be doing the type of things that I do. So I want you guys to really think about those things in your life that inspire you. I want you to reflect on a moment from your childhood, a person from your childhood, an experience in your childhood that has allowed you to transform your life and become the person you want to be. I'm forever grateful to Mr. and Mrs. Crandall and the support and love that they showed me during really difficult times in my life. And I wonder who you're grateful to in your life. So thank you for letting me introduce you to Kyle and Mr. and Mrs. Crandall. They touched my life, and I hope this story touched yours. And I really want you to do me a huge favor, and please share this story, share this podcast with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing it. It means the world to me. And head on over to Apple Podcasts, where you could subscribe to this podcast or any other place where you listen to your podcast. And I will see you tomorrow. What's up, everyone? This is Elliott, Connie. And for over 15 years, I've helped thousands of counselors support their clients and worked with tens of thousands of clients on my own and helping them find solutions in their everyday lives. And I want to welcome you back to the aha moments where every day I share lessons I've learned in my work and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. And today I want to talk to you about inspiration. If there's one superpower I have, it's that I stay in a constant state of inspiration. And it guides almost everything that I do in my life. It guides almost everything I do in my work. It's probably the number one thing that has led to me feeling fulfilled and satisfied and spiritually connected to the life that I lead. And certainly played a role in the career that I chose. You know, when I went to college, believe it or not, my very first major was in marine biology. I've always had a love of the ocean and marine life. I went to college and majored in marine biology because I thought it'd be such a cool job to spend my career investigating underwater life. And, you know, I had these visions of spending my life with a scuba tank on my back, just underwater all the time. I changed to major in psychology because I realized, you know, I was really struggling with depression and very serious suicidal thoughts. At this time, I don't know, 19, 20 years old, I really was struggling with life. My childhood had been riddled with some difficult things, and I had a sense of hopelessness about what my future would look like, and decided that I didn't want to be here anymore. You know, the best way I can describe that time period to people is what I thought was, like, if this is what life was like, I didn't want to have it. Like, if this is life, I didn't want one. That's basically how I felt at the time. But then some amazing things happened. I made some choices in my life. I decided that, you know, people who want to abuse me and make me feel bad about myself, I had to get them out of my life. I forced myself to start thinking about a future that was positive and possible. Like, that was the thing for me at the time. I needed to think about a future that was both positive and possible and live my life as if I could have a different future. And it made a huge difference. Massive difference. Before I knew it, I was kind of walking taller, feeling better, making better choices, having better time around my friends. I just felt good for the first time in a long time, maybe even ever. And I started thinking about all the people out there that are struggling with things that were bothering me or struggling with anything. It made me want to help people. It made me want to talk to people about the power of hope and the power about dreaming of a different future. The power of being able to think about a future in a different way. And I was lit on fire. Like, I was so inspired and so dedicated and so motivated. I wanted desperately to work with people so that I can share the power of hope with them. I wanted to be a beacon of hope in people's lives, to show them what was possible if they began to dream beyond their problems. I wanted to show people what was possible if they began to dream beyond their circumstances. I wanted to show people what's possible if they began to believe in themselves. So I went to my academic advisor. You know, she's the one that does your schedule with you when you're in college and make sure that you're on track to graduate and all of those things. And I told her I want to major in psychology and completely changed my life. I got my degree in psychology and then ultimately a degree in psychotherapy. And it was funny because I never thought that I would be someone that would have a graduate degree. Ever, not ever. It was just totally not a thing that I thought about. But now I was so inspired to make a difference in people's lives. That's the thing that I ran out and did and get to spend my career inspiring people. I now travel all over the world. I've been to over 30 countries. I've been all over the United States. I've been everywhere teaching people how to have conversations where they will inspire their clients with hope. And that's really what this podcast is about. That's really what all of my work is about, is I just want to inspire people to live their best lives. And I want to ask you to think about what inspires your decisions, what inspires your life. Maybe it's your family, maybe it's a passion for a hobby, or maybe it's a passion for your work as well. Because I think when we spend some time thinking about what inspires us, it helps us continue to stay in a state of inspiration. Thanks so much for being here today. Thanks so much for listening. Please, please, please do me a huge favor and share this podcast with someone you think could benefit from this message today. And don't forget, head on over to Apple Podcasts and rate this podcast, subscribe to this podcast, and in fact, subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to your podcast, and I will see you tomorrow. What's up, everyone? This is Elliott, Connie, and for over 15 years, I've helped thousands of counselors support their clients in finding solutions in their everyday lives and worked with tens of thousands of clients on my own. And I want to welcome you back to the aha moments where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. And today, I want to talk to you about inspiration and how you can use small bits of inspiration and small details in your life to really enhance and enrich your life and just make life better. I think one of the things I've learned more than anything else is whenever we have like a big problem or whenever we're going through a struggle, we try to solve that struggle with an equally big solution instead of just doing something small, instead of just doing something different to create a different experience in your life. So let me give you an example and tell you what I mean. When the pandemic happened, just like everybody else, my entire life changed. Before the pandemic, I traveled quite a bit. I traveled about 500,000 miles a year, traveling around the world, teaching people how to do psychotherapy. And then the pandemic happens, travel shuts down, there's no more live events, and I am no longer traveling anywhere. And I'm working from my home office, seeing my clients on Zoom, doing lectures on Zoom, literally not leaving my office. And I noticed that my mood was dropping. I was getting lethargic. I was not moving enough. I was not getting outside and getting fresh air and sunlight. And by the fall in November, I thought, okay, I got to do something about this. So I decided, let me see if I can try a hobby that will get me out and moving around and doing something different. And there's a store that specializes in selling outdoor things. The store is called Bass Pro Shop. And I've driven by this Bass Pro Shop 1,000 times. Here in my local area, it's off of a major highway. I can't even describe to you how many times I've driven by this Bass Pro Shop. And I've only gone there once. And that was when I had an undergraduate job where I took people out on field trips from this medical clinic. But on this day, I decided, well, I'm going to go to Bass Pro Shop. I got there 10 minutes before it closed, and I'm walking around the Bass Pro Shop, and they have a bunch of outdoor hobbies, lots of which do not interest me, hunting and all these kind of things. Those are just not things that interest me, guns, that kind of stuff. But I found myself at the archery part of the store. I'm talking to a guy who's their archery pro, and he's telling me all about compound bows and what they do and how you use them for target shooting and all of these things. And I'm really fascinated by it. I'm really enamored by it. And I start looking at all these bows, and I decided it'd be really cool if I could buy one of these just to see if this could be the hobby that I would do. And these bows are expensive, man, $800, $1,100. And I thought, I'm not spending $800 or $1,100 on some experiment. I'm not spending this kind of money on something that I don't know that I would like. And then there's this bow that costs $250. And I said to the guy, I said, why does this one cost $250? Is it a significantly lower quality than the other ones? And he said, no. He said, to be honest with you, that bow comes from one of the top bow companies, and we don't know why that specific bow is $249, but that's how much the company sells that very specific bow for. And it's a great bow. He said it's a great starter bow because of the price, and it's also a great expert bow because you can adjust it. And a lot of people buy that bow to get started, but they use it for the rest of their lives. So I thought, you know what, $250. I can handle that as an experiment. I bought that bow, I bought some arrows, and I bought a target. I went home and set all the things up in my yard the next day. And over the next year, archery has become an amazing hobby for me. I love the practice of shooting a bow at a target. I go target shooting and have gotten pretty good at it over this past year. It feels really good to be working at something and mastering it. It gets me outside and moving around. Even little stupid things, like when you shoot an arrow down a target range, and let's say I'm shooting at the 30-yard target, if I shoot 5 arrows, I've got to walk the 30 yards to go get the 5 arrows out of the target. So like this one little shift has significantly increased my life satisfaction while I'm still not traveling like I used to, and while life is still being impacted by the pandemic. And I think we have to understand that if we are having struggles, oftentimes just doing something new is enough to completely change your life experience. So that's exactly what I want to encourage you guys to do. Find an experiment, something that can get you out, moving around, do something new, exciting, and invigorating in your life, even if it's small, and see how that uplifts your mood, uplifts your life, and makes everything around you better. Hey, thanks for being here today. If you wouldn't mind doing me a huge favor, I'd love it if you'd share this podcast with at least one person in your life that you think could benefit from this message. And don't forget to subscribe to my podcast on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Rate this podcast, give me feedback, share this podcast, and I'll see you tomorrow. What's up, everyone? This is Elliott, Connie, and for over 15 years, I've helped thousands of counselors support their clients in finding everyday solutions in their everyday lives and worked with tens of thousands of clients on my own. And I want to welcome you back to the aha moments where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. And today I want to talk about maybe the most inspiring person that I think has ever walked on earth. And it's a person that may actually surprise you. And that person is the famous comedian, legendary Richard Pryor. Now, I want to tell you why I find Richard Pryor so unbelievably inspiring. Growing up, perhaps my biggest struggle was being my authentic self. Now, why that was such a big struggle, there were a couple of reasons for that. Number one, my self-esteem was not great, mostly as a response to the way I was being treated at home by my father, who would say really horrible things to me. He would do really horrible things, and it's just not easy to get comfortable in your own skin when you're going through those things. And it's not easy to view yourself in a positive light. It's not easy to think that you're capable of great things when someone is literally telling you that you're worthless, you don't matter, you'll never be anything good, and like all of the horrible things that you would say. The other reason is because I eventually moved to a place called Franklin, Massachusetts, which is a suburb of Boston. And I was one of the only Black people in that environment. Like my family was amongst the only Black family in that environment. And it just led to experiencing racism, being around people who had biases against my family and people who looked like me. Like it was a really challenging time. And really all I ever wanted was to be myself. All I ever wanted was to figure out who I was. All I ever wanted was to live authentically. Probably the person that I knew in my life that I respected the most was my Uncle Jeffrey. God rest his soul. A shout out to Jeffrey. Rest in peace. I love you so much and miss you every day. But my Uncle Jeffrey was one of my idols. And the reason Jeffrey was one of my idols is he was the most unapologetic person I ever met. Like, not unapologetic and like he arrogantly wouldn't apologize if he did anything wrong, but he was unapologetically himself. And I admired that in him. I looked up to that in him. I aspired to be that and couldn't figure out how to be that. And I saw that in Richard Pryor. Like, I can remember being young and learning about Richard Pryor. There was a movie that came out called Harlem Nights, which was starring Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor, and a whole slew of other comedians that were really popular in the late 80s when this movie came out. And I thought Richard Pryor was so funny that I started watching his stand-up, and I learned that Richard Pryor had a really difficult background too. His grandmother owned a brothel in Illinois, Peoria, Illinois, and he saw things and went through things as a child that were things that a child should never see. And he had a dream. He had a dream to become a famous comedian, and he worked to make that dream come true. But what makes him so inspiring to me is his comedy was unlike anyone else's at the time. Because it wasn't a show. It wasn't punchlines. He was telling stories, true, honest stories from his life. Someone once said that a legend is someone that everything before them was obsolete and everything after them will never be the same. And Richard Pryor was that. Like he had addiction, and he talked about that on stage in a very raw way. And he had troubles with women, and he talked about that on stage in a very raw way. And he talked about it in a way that made you laugh, but made you think. He talked about that in a way that made you go through the experience with him. And he talked about that in a way that let you know that as an individual, as a human being, he was owning who he was. And I remember being young watching Richard Pryor on stage, like these old videos from the 70s, thinking, I want to be that. And as I grew and as I healed from the things that I went through in my life, probably the thing I'm most proud of today is I can comfortably say that I am my authentic self. There's freedom in being in your authentic self. And I worked and earned to achieve my authentic self. I accept my flaws and I'm proud of my strengths. And it took a long time for me to get there. And I want everybody out there who can hear my voice, I want everybody out there listening to this podcast to understand the power and strength of being your authentic self. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for listening. And I'd love it if you could do me a huge favor and share this podcast with at least one person that you think could benefit from this message. At least one person that you think could benefit from walking in their authentic self. And don't forget to head on over to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, or anywhere else you subscribe. And please, please, please leave a comment and rate this podcast. And I'll see you tomorrow. What's up, everyone? This is Elliott, Connie. For over 15 years, I've helped thousands of counselors support their clients in finding solutions for their everyday lives and worked with tens of thousands of clients on my own. And I want to welcome you back to the aha moments where every day I share lessons I've learned in my life and in my work to help you live your very best life. And today I want to talk to you about something that inspired me when I was in graduate school that made me want to make a difference in my field, which is the field of psychotherapy, and made me want to touch lives in a way that I hadn't anticipated. So when I was in graduate school, I wanted to become the very best counselor or psychotherapist I could become. And I worked very hard and very diligently to do that. And I studied the psychotherapy approaches, and I read all the assignments my professors told me to read. And I did all the things that I thought I was supposed to do to become successful. And I noticed a pattern, or I noticed a trend that surprised me given the way the world was at the time. And what I noticed was I didn't see any people of color in the books we were studying. That really bothered me because I think representation matters. It really bothered me because I think people of color have made a contribution to this field and to the world. And it really bothered me because I needed our field to be more diverse, and I wanted our field to have more representation. And as a black man, I just couldn't believe that here we are. I went to grad school in 2004. So here we are in 2004, and there literally were zero people of color in the books that I was studying. And I said to myself, I hope one day I could be a professional that could represent people of color and could represent diversity in the field. So years go on, and I wrote one book, then I wrote two books, then I wrote three books, then I wrote four books. And two moments happened that have inspired me to keep going. You know, I've experienced bigotry in this field. I've experienced racism in this field. I've experienced racial attacks and discrimination and all of it. Two moments stand out to me as moments that are significant that really inspire me. And one moment was I was at a conference, I believe I was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I was walking down the hallway, and there was a few women walking towards me, and they were younger than me. They looked like grad school age, mid to late 20s. And one of them stopped me and said, "Are you Elliott, Connie?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Oh my goodness, you were an answer to one of the questions in an exam I had in grad school recently. Can I take a picture with you for Instagram?" And I said, "Sure." And I posed for a picture with this young lady for her Instagram. And it was huge to me because this was evidence that I had made it into those books as someone that people in my field would study. And so I knew then that nobody would go through the experiences that I went through where there was literally no people of color being represented as people to study in the field of psychotherapy. And then the second moment that happened, it happened in South Africa. I went to South Africa to give a lecture, and I was down there teaching, doing my thing, and the woman who hosts me came and said, during one of the breaks, she came to me and she said, "Elliott, somebody wants you to meet." And she introduced me to this black woman, and she says this woman's name, and I don't remember her name. I'll never forget her face. I'll never forget this moment, but I don't remember her name. And she said that she took a bus from 2 countries north of South Africa. And she took a bus going through the African bush, and she slept The journey took her 3 days, and she slept in the African bush in this bus for 3 days just to come hear my lecture. And I looked at the woman who was crying, and I said, "What made you go on such a journey just to hear me lecture?" And she said, "I got a flyer from someone that said Elliott Connie's going to be in South Africa, and I saw a picture of you, and I saw you were an African-American male. And I needed to see what we look like on that stage. I needed to see what we look like doing this job. I needed to see you," she said. And I said, "Well, I hope it's been worth it." Now, remember, this is like day one of a 3 or 4 day event, and it's the very first break. So we've only just gotten started. And I said, I hope you experience my lecture is worth it." And she cried even harder, and she said, "It's already been worth it." And she gave me a really big hug. And those two moments inspire me because they let me know that representation does matter. And my work has mattered. My work has made a difference to people, and they have made a difference to me. And it helped me push through the discrimination and the hard moments and the difficulties, and remember that there are people watching that need to be inspired, and they need to see what people like them look like doing this job. And that's been a really, really huge thing for me. And I want you to remember, you are not alone. Someone has paved the way for you, and you are paving the way for someone. So when life gets hard and when things get challenging, always, always remember that. So hey, thanks so much for being here today. And if you wouldn't mind, please do me a huge favor. I'd love it if you would share this podcast with at least one person that you think could benefit from this message today. And don't forget to head on over to Apple Podcasts where you can subscribe, or subscribe anywhere else you listen to podcasts. And please leave a comment and rate this podcast. And I will see you on Monday.